What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show. Me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com. And today, I am reviewing the year for Bellator MMA in 2024. And you know what? Some might say it was the most interesting year, the most insane year, the most crazy year in the history of Bellator MMA. Although there have been a few crazy ones previous to this as well. And it was. It's been obviously for both Bellator and the PFL, it's been very much kind of an in-between year. Like, I think a lot of people at this time last year, and I want to start off the podcast today by talking about this time last year and the hopes we had in Alfred, but a lot of people had a lot of hopes that like we would get things done pretty quickly in terms of how the PFL / Bellator, how would you put it, a sister act would work. And it ran away just kind of as we maybe expected for a while. Bellator ran a few events, PFL did their season, and that was fine. And then we kind of ran into a thing where I think maybe midway through the year we were like, what's a Bellator fighter? What's a PFL fighter? Should we even know? Is this just the way it's going to always be? And if it is, that's fine. But then obviously towards the end of the year, a couple of Bellator events got cancelled. I don't know how much you should read into that in terms of the future of the Bellator name. Like, I think the PFL will always have like fight nights or whatever you want to call them, but like in terms of the Bellator name, in terms of doing events like the old Bellator events, I wonder if that will continue, and we can talk more about that in a second. But in terms of this year, I think a lot of people had hopes that we would have clarity on that, and we just don't. And I think if you were to ask me, I'm recording this here in the first week in January 2025. If you were to ask me the same question on the 31st of January 2024, I'd have the same answer for you. You know, I hope it'll be good. I hope we get clarification soon, and I hope I hope clarity, I think, is what is needed with Bellator and with the PFL and all, because, and you know, people might think they're coming into a Bellator 2024 review, it's going to be very negative here. It's actually not. I you know, everyone kind of knows my Sheehan Show reviews and stuff like that are always very positive anyway, and this will be too, because I'm going to look back at the year and look back at some of the epic fights and some of the epic fighters and all that throughout this year. But I actually think there's and it's not just with Bellator, but it's with PFL MENA, some of the, like the Octagon fights, KSW, a lot of these different places. I feel like they all had really okay years, good years, or great years, right? I don't, in terms of inside the cage, or maybe outside of the cage with all different promotions, you could have, you know, you could have your argument that way. But I feel like this was a very mundane year for MMA. And what I mean by that is, like, I think there was so much UFC, and there was a lot of it very bad. And by the time we'd finished that, I didn't know had anyone room for kind of the rest. And when they did, I think they enjoyed it. But there was such kind of a, you know, a move from the UFC, I think. Again, like they have done throughout their years, and maybe this is a bigger discussion for a podcast, maybe during the year or something like that. But the UFC, I feel like, have tried to take over again more than they had been recently. The signings they got and different things, and the amount of cards they put on, and now signing, you know, getting involved in boxing and slap, and you know, putting on jiu-jitsu and stuff. Like, it's very full, and it's so full, right, the schedule, that I'm not sure people actually have the time to look back and see a lot of these cards and go, oh, do you know what, they were actually pretty good. And I think for the most part, I think they were. Like, going through some of the Bellator cards here again, I think for the most part they were actually pretty good. Now, would you like to see more of them? Would you like to see more clarity? Yes, but for what we had, it wasn't bad. Now, let's before we get into the cards here, and I'll go through card by card here. Let's talk about what we would like to see. And when I say clarity, when I say like a plan and stuff, what would we like to see? And I'll be honest, I don't really have the answer to that question. I think at this exact time last year, I probably said the same thing, that I don't have the answer to that question. But maybe maybe I do have a better answer to that question now, right? Because PFL have basically already kind of said we're going to be doing the season format like we always do next year, which I agree with. I know a lot of people maybe don't, but I like the season format. I think it in a world again that every fight seems not to matter, they make every fight matter, right? Which I think if they gave up would be a big mistake. So I've no problems with them doing that at all. So how should Bellator live in the space that the PFL has already taken up and the space that's left? I have no problem with the Bellator Champions Series fights the way they were happening before. They promise kind of big things. There's going to be two title fights in every card. We're going to go to this city and that city and that city. We're going to have this amount of cards, that amount of cards, this amount of cards. And on all of that, it didn't happen. Right? It just did not happen this year. Now, that doesn't mean the cards were terrible or bad. In fact, again, as I say, the most of them were good. But the plan for last year just didn't end up working out. That doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad plan, right? Now, again, am I going to give you a plan here that makes Bellator/PFL take over the UFC or become like massively successful and make a lot of money? No, if I had that plan, I'd go out and I'd do it myself and I'd run my own promotion. So I'm not claiming here to be that intelligent at all. But what I can say is, and what I've looked at over the last few years, obviously the last year, but also with what MMA has given us previously, I do think if you put on Bellator cards, let's say like they promised last year, again, my point was the idea wasn't bad. The execution just wasn't good. And I don't actually blame anyone for that. People getting injured and all of that is tough to do. Now, look, there's other things as well, and we can get into that in a second, I suppose, about the champions not being happy and wanting more fights and all. You would hope if there is a plan for next year that will be taken care of. But as I said, we'll get into that in a second. But I think, like, you put on the Bellator cards, you put on the PFL cards, you have the season, you have your 10 fights, your 3 and 3 and 3 and 1. And you do them. That's perfect. You have set dates for all of them, right? That are going to be happening, and you have a good few weeks like in between them that there's not going to be the PFL cards on. And I know that this is obviously the way they have done it before, but maybe not in totality. But like, if you have 5 weeks, right, have a week off Bellator card, have a couple of weeks off Bellator card, have a week off PFL card, right? If they did that, the Bellator Champions Series cards had them well planned in advance. Everybody knew, like if you're the featherweight champion, you're going to be fighting, March and October. You're the light heavyweight champion, you're going to be fighting May and December, whatever it might be. I think people would be happy with that, right? I think the champions would be happy with that if they, if they still, some people just want to move on and that's fine. But I think if that was the case, they're getting paid well. I think that could be done. The other thing I think that really needs to be done is I think anyway, and I might be wrong, but I think we need a Bellator roster and we need a PFL roster. And that can change every year. But the clarity, I said that word clarity many times now. I just think if we had a bit of clarity about what Bellator is and what PFL is and the separation between them, I think it'd make things a lot better, right? Or if you want to get rid of Bellator and just call it the PFL Champions Series, there's no problem with that as well. But also, I think you need a bit of clarity between them. And it's as easy, right? It's as easy as saying this. It's like, here are how many people? 40, 50 people in the PFL tournament. Everyone else for this year is a Bellator fighter or a PFL Champions fighter or whatever you want to call him. And I think, like, if Don Davis or whoever's, doing the decision making in terms of the MMA side of it, was to come out and say that on the 10th of January or the 15th of January or the 1st of February before they start off, whenever, I actually think that would be brilliant. I think it'd make a lot of sense. I think it'd help the fighters. I think it'd help the fans. I think it'd help the media. And everyone can kind of go from there, So I would not, at this stage, write off Bellator. And here's a reason. We'll get into the events now in a second, but here's a reason why I wouldn't write off Bellator. And I actually think I'd keep Bellator going, and I'd keep the name, and I'd keep the champions that they have, and I'd run those events alongside the PFL events while still having the PFL season. Right? I don't think there actually needs to be too much change. Again, I'll say the words clarity. Clarity. Just if there is a bit of clarity in terms of the fighters, in terms of when the events are on, in terms of the events actually being on themselves, arenas, areas, and all of that, I think there's no problem. And again, here's why I would keep Bellator going. The champions right now, okay, Ryan Bader, Corey Anderson, Johnny Eblen, Ramzan Kuramagomedov, Usman Nurmagomedov, Patricio Pitbull, Patchy Mix, Chris Cyborg, and Liz Carmouche. I'll tell you what, you have some real talent there. Like, you have people that people are interested in there. Like, Corey Anderson has always kind of been a guy people are interested in. Like, Ryan Bader is a guy, you know, he's, I suppose, split opinion, but like, I've seen people talking about Ryan Bader against Francis Ngannou. I don't know, maybe at this stage of Ryan Bader's career, would that be, possible, but maybe. Johnny Eblen, a lot of people talk, and I'll put the three of these together. Eblen, Kuramagomedov, Usman Nurmagomedov. A lot of people are talking about the three of them possibly being the best middleweight, welterweight, and lightweight in the world. And I think rightly so. They're three really, really, really good fighters. Then you've Patricio, who people know, and people talking about Patricio as one of the greatest featherweights of all time. Patchy Mix, he's right up there as one of the best bantamweights in the world at the moment. And Chris Cyborg, one of the greatest of all time. And Liz Carmouche, okay, she just lost, so she's had a bit of a low point, but also, not to be harsh on Liz here or anything, you could very easily slide Dakota Dacheva in there and, one fight, and who's the champion in Dakota Dacheva? There's a lot to be worked with there. There is really a lot to be worked with. And I know this is a Bellator review of 2024, but I think Bellator, what they have as champions is very, very good. And do you know what I would do? To steal something from one championship, they have a top 5 rankings. I'd love Bellator to do that. Get Ryan Bader and put 4 heavyweights, just 4 random heavyweights. Rank them, put them on the website. Corey Anderson, 4 random light heavyweights. Not random, but you know what I mean. And the next one, let's say, I don't know, I'm just looking at the card here, Carl Moore, right? Let's say Carl Moore is next for Corey Anderson. Right, he's number 1 contender, and who's next? Let's say Nimkov. They're on about making that fight. Nimkov's number 3. So the second that the fight is over, the winner of Corey Anderson and Carl Moore is going to be fighting Nimkov next. Anderson goes back, he fights number 4. Someone wins a couple of fights or something. Maybe in the PFL or maybe in the undercard of a champion series. They're in there, and don't overcomplicate it. Don't be saying we need a top 10 or a top 15. Let's just keep it to the championships, because it's a Bellator champion series. Let's remember that. I think that would be smart. I think they can do it. So, we're always talking about what's the plan, what do they do with Bellator, how do they manage it? I think that's how you manage it, right? So, let's go. Let's do it, Bellator, and I think Spider just landed on me. Anyway, let's go. Let's do it. Right, let's have a look at the year. So for Bellator, there were this year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events, and in 2 other events. So we had the Bellator versus PFL fights, and then we had the PFL Super Fights, which was, kind of a Bellator as well. Plus we have the one card at the start of 2025, which will be on in the next couple of weeks here, which is Usman Nurmagomedov versus Paul Hughes, and a few other very, very good fights as well. So, there's a lot of people been talking, is this a Bellator card? Is this a PFL card? Is this a half and half? I think they're all, at the moment, as we stand, I would say everything's a half and half card. So until we hear more, I suppose that's the answer. And it all started off so well for Bellator. Like, they went in there and they absolutely decimated PFL in Saudi Arabia the 24th of February 2024 with the PFL champions versus the Bellator champions. And it really showed, it was funny because a lot of people said, PFL are after buying Bellator, and the Bellator champions are better. Oh, who should have been buying who? And I'm like, but they're all the same now. They're no longer a Bellator PFL champ. Bellator and PFL are the same company. Now, again, should we split them and all of that? We could talk about that. But those fighters winning the fights is not a negative for PFL, as a business, as an entity, because they have all those fighters under contract. So it's brilliant for them, if anything, right? Because then now, let's say if they just wanted to have PFL, they could put them in there and they're their top fighters. So I don't know. Do you know what as well? I know this is a lot. And as someone, who covers, obviously, the Chasing Pack with my good friend Ian O'Neill and our podcast, The Chasing Pack, over in Severe May, but here on Sherdog as well. With I don't do the UFC previews, but I do all the rest of them, I really enjoy it. I think it's very good. But there's a bit of a snobbery in MMA. It's almost like, oh, PFL lost. Oh, Negrea. You know, like why? What? Like why do people hate it? Like even this GFL thing or whatever is coming on. I'm like, I think they're making them a lot of mistakes and making a hames of things, but at the same time, I'm like, you know, that's kind of cool. You know, let's watch it. Let's see. You know, and also, here's another thing in MMA. Like MMA has always loved watching the world burn. Like when did that go? Like especially, and not necessarily with the PFL and Bellator, but with this GFL thing and other things as well. Like the madness is part of it. And we'll get back to the card because this was madness in terms of top quality stuff. Now, the card kind of did fall apart a little bit because there was a lot of injuries and stuff. And, like, I think one big issue, obviously, for Bellator, and we talked about it at the start, but, like, injuries and things like that. When you're only doing, like, the 5 or 6 cards a year, if you have 2 or 3 injuries, it's going to be very tough because it looks like, oh, geez, every time there's a card, there's people getting injured. Whereas if that's the UFC, you know, who I'm sure had many more injuries, you know, they're doing 12 big cards a year and then probably another, 12 you know, medium cards and then another 24 small cards or whatever it is. It's only a dint, right? Whereas for Bellator or promotions who are doing fewer cards, it looks like, you know, I don't know, what's bigger than a dint, a hole maybe. So, yeah. So let's go through this card a little bit. Let's talk about some of the best performers, I suppose, from the year and some of the big fights in this. I suppose, like, Hina Fahey beating Ryan Bader was arguably one of the most important fights of the year because Hina Fahey became the guy, you know, who obviously fought against Francis Ngannou after winning the year before. And that was massive. You know, maybe if Bader had won, could he have fought him or whatever might have happened, you know. And Hina Fahey, I believe, you know, Francis Ngannou got the big payday for him, so that was absolutely massive. And he obviously knocked out Ryan Bader in 21 seconds as well. It was epic and a great setup for the Francis Ngannou fight because you needed someone like that. You needed someone who was dangerous, you know, that even myself here talking about the cards, I like to kind of like saying, well, this guy has a chance. And he did have a chance, you know. So that was great. We Johnny Eblen against Impa Kasanganay. Like Impa probably had a bit of an unlucky year this year, I would say. He came up against some tremendous fighters this year and obviously lost that fight by split decision. You know, that was a close one. I think the judges could have gone either way on that, to be honest, and it was a really, really close one. Jason Jackson had a great start to the year, obviously winning here, beating Ray Cooper, and then we've Nimkov against Capoloza, Romero and Santos, which wasn't a classic, but AJ McKee and Collard was very fun while it lasted. It was an early armbar for AJ McKee. Aaron Pico obviously beat Corrales as well, and I thought the undercard was good, you know, for the showcase fights with Clarissa Shields and Abdullah Al-Khatani, who obviously went on to big things in PFL Mina as well there. So, and you know, Baggio Ali Walsh was also on the card as well as Malik Palashel. So, you know, the PFL versus Bellator card was a good card, kind of ravaged by injury and ravaged by fallouts and stuff like that. But I think one that at the time we said, geez, that's going to be amazing. It wasn't quite. We're like, maybe next year it'll be even better. And like, they're not really doing it this year, I suppose. Maybe they will. But I think it'll be pretty amazing this year as well. Like the welterweights, you know, Musayev versus Kuramagomedov. By God, if there's a fight that I would like to see made, I'd go for that one. But so let's move on. And the first Bellator proper card of the year was the Bellator Champion Series in Belfast, which happened on March 22nd. And Corey Anderson took on Carl Moore, and Patricio Ferreira took on Jeremy Kennedy. So there was 2 title fights on this. So what they promised, they delivered on this, and it was a pretty good card. Obviously, Carl Moore and Corey Anderson. You know, thinking back, and I know it feels like such a long time ago, but it was a relatively close fight. Corey Anderson came out on top. I think obviously Carl Moore, a country made of mine. You'd be sad for Carl not to pick it up. Obviously, would have been a bias thrown in, but I think a lot of people are kind of happy for Corey Anderson. He's been around for a long time, and he's suffered, and he's had his losses, and you know, maybe at times you think maybe it's never going to happen for Corey, but obviously it obviously did, before this, but coming into the Carl Moore fight as well, and winning the championship winning the championship fight against Carl was massive for him, and to go to enemy territory as well. Obviously, Carl from up in Ulster, it was a big win for Corey Anderson. But I think a lot of people said at the time, Carl, maybe one more fight and he'd be back there, but Carl's not fought since, I don't think so. you know, maybe another guy. I actually saw him tweeting there the other day, and he said, all right, I'm coming back, or not, Instagram maybe. I'll be back soon, so that's an interesting one. Patricio obviously beat Jeremy Kennedy, and you know, I thought Jeremy had a great chance coming into that. Obviously, very good wrestler, but Patricio showed, you know, after a couple of losses outside of the promotion, there's still, you know, still a bit of petrol in the engine, as they say. He's obviously one of the guys, you know, I talked about earlier on, who's kind of looking maybe to go to the UFC or looking out, and like, you'd wonder if they said, right, okay, we have 3 cards coming up next year, you're going to be on all 3 of these. Like, would he want to stay, or would he still want to go? Because there is, you know, and I understand it if it's either of those ways, to be honest, but like, some people just come to a stage in their career, like an Eddie Alvarez or Michael Chandler, they just kind of want to move on. And you could say the same maybe even for Corey Anderson or Demetrius Johnson, they just want to move on from the UFC. I think it's probably a bit of both for Patricio at this stage. I think, like, he was always a guy who got constant fights all the time when not injured, and I think the fact that didn't happen, like he fought this year, so it's not like, you know, he's been left on the sidelines for 18 months or anything here. But at the same time, I'd be interested. Like, again, it all boils down to that announcement about all the events coming up. And I'd be interested to see what he says. But he's still the champion at the moment, and that's a good place to be. Elsewhere on this card, I think, look, it was a great, I suppose, setup night for a lot of the Irish fighters, a lot of the UK fighters. Fabian Edwards obviously beat Aaron Jeffrey to earn himself a title shot again. James Gallagher and Leandro Higo put on a great fight. It's a pity we haven't seen James since, obviously. Manuel Souza against Tim Wilde was one of the knockouts of the year. And then a lot of the Irish contingent had some great wins. Kieran Clark, Kieran Clark had a fantastic last couple of years. Nathan Kelly, one of the knockouts of the year, massive KO, and the young Nathan Kelly in the amateur was there as well. But Luke Traynor had a great win over Grant Neal, Alfie Davis over Oscar Onsworth, and Abraham Babley as well, who went on to have a big fight later on in the year. So that was the first Bellator Champion Series fight of the year. The second one was over in Paris in May 17th, sorry. And this is Patchy Mix against Magomedov, and this was the Kylian Mbappe card, wasn't it? As it's famously known. But I think Patchy Mix proved in this fight, you know, he didn't prove in this fight, but he proved in. I was going to say he proved in this fight that he was one of the best in the world. He proved that before this, but you know what he proved in this fight? That, like, maybe when he's not necessarily at his best, and I actually wasn't that. It was that Magomedov was at his best, and maybe he hadn't been in all these fights recently. Mix is still able to get through. It was a very close fight from memory. Now, I haven't gone back and watched it, but I believe from memory, I think it was a very, very close fight. But Magomedov, people forget how good that guy is. And, Mix was able to come through it. You know, Doumbé beat Willis, and, what a star Doumbé has become. Like, if you're, if you're PFL/Bellator, you don't want to put Doumbé into a season. Like, the Bellator Champion Series in France twice, 3 times a year is perfect. And sometimes these things are no-brainers. Go to France twice a year. Go to Dublin twice a year. Go to London once a year. You know, if you have, San Jose loves a bit of it. Go to the Mohegan Sun. They'll love a bit of Bellator. And that's it. That's your season done. Then it's, here, just let me be the booking agent for Bellator there. It's easy, lads. Not rocket science. All right. But anyway, yeah, the rest of that card in, some good stuff on the Slim Trebelsi, Yves Landau, Costello Van Steenis, Mansar Barnaoui, all got wins on it. Nasser Lejuge as well, who had a fantastic year. My shipman Aspinallado again picking up wins. Not a blow-away card, but one of those ones that you'll remember for a long time with the amazing crowd over in Paris. Then they were back to Ireland, and I suppose this was an emergence of 2 of the best fighters in Bellator. Obviously, Ramazan Kuramagomedov just beat the absolute brakes off of Jason Jackson for the first kind of 3 rounds anyway, and then Jackson kind of came back at him towards the end, but what a fighter he looks at. Only 13 fights into his career. Obviously, he won the welterweight strap on that sunny June night in Dublin. And then Paul Hughes beat Bobby King. And okay, maybe this wasn't the night that Paul Hughes emerged, but he got the win there, and then this was the reason he got the next fight, and we'll obviously talk about that when it comes. But like those two, like you could argue, I'm going to be picking my fighter of the year here, and it's hard to look past either of those two, to be honest, for your Bellator fighter of the year. We'll get back to that in a minute. But you know, if you're talking about performance of the year, like the first 3 rounds of that Ramazan Kuramagomedov fight against Jason Jackson were epic. Now the next couple of rounds came after it, so that has to be taken into account as well. But it's hard to look past that. There was a couple of shocks then, I suppose. Dalton Rosta against Norbert Navini. You know, Norbert, I don't think get his best night in that fight. And Arlene Blinkow, you could say the same against Sinead Kavanagh. And that was all a bit weird with McGregor in the crowd and all in that fight. But Blinkow, you know, did a great job. And you know, Sinead would even say that herself, I think. You know, Dara Kelly got a lovely finish here. Like all these Kelly guys, you know, Nathan Kelly as well. These lads are absolute beasts. And they have a couple of big fights coming up here in a couple of weeks as well. But Kasimov got a good win here as well. Kasan Magomed Sharapov, who's, you know, fighting Mr. Kelly coming up soon. And, you know, Michelle Montague as well got a win here in this card. Let's move on to September 7th over in San Diego. And this is where we saw, obviously, Usman Nurmagomedov taking on Alexander Shabliy. And, you know, I suppose a fight that had been touted for a long time. This was supposed to be the finale, wasn't it, of the tournament, and then it eventually happened in September, and Usman obviously went in there and won the decision there. Wasn't you know, it was one of those jab kind of fests from the outside type of fights, and Usman got it done. You know, you look at Usman, you look at a lot of, say, the Russian fighters in Bellator and PFL, but even, you know, Usman's camp, and, you know, from maybe down to the Umar and you know, Makhachev and all the rest of them. Geez, that camp is absolutely unbelievable. And for Bellator to have, you know, a good few fighters out of that camp, it's very good for them. The rest of that card in, Larkin got another, you know, great knockout. Aaron Jeffrey had a pretty good year from then on, and, you know, he got the win there. But other than that, you know, it was some of the up-and-comers. You know, Jordan Newman's performance against Imam Shafi Aliyev is one of the performances of the year. You know, you look at the Kuramagomedov, you look at Paul Hughes, and it probably outshines it absolutely. But that was a fantastic performance. And then the last card of the year turned out to be in September 14th, just a week later. Sarah Collins against Leah McCourt in London. You know, it was obviously supposed to be who was it? Johnny Eblin and Fabian Edwards, and obviously that card was moved. That fight was moved. We'll talk about it in a second. But I think this was at the stage where kind of like the other two cards were cancelled, which were supposed to go down. Let me just go check here. November 16th and December 31st. Obviously they didn't end up happening, and I think at the end of the year they kind of, I think Bellator PFL made the decision, let's just concentrate on the PFL finale, let's just concentrate on the PFL super fights, and we'll kind of go from there. We'll see what happens next year type of thing. I think that's what happened. I also would hope that it's right, we're planning for next year, and it's going to be very, very you know, you can write it down on an Excel sheet or something, exactly how things are going to look for next year. But look, we'll meet that road when we come to it. But back to London, the Bellator card. I suppose this was a bit of a blow, I suppose, for Bellator. I think they wanted to have the Leah McCourt fight, obviously, against Cyborg at some stage down the line. She lost to Sarah Collins. Sarah Collins only 6-0, because it's kind of hard to put her into that fight. She might need one more, but she's a tremendous fighter and did really, really well here, and obviously finished Leah McCourt very early. And, you know, I think Sarah Collins might beat Cyborg. I think she's that good, really. She's very, very, very good. And this is a good card, I suppose, for a lot of the English. Simone Powell got a great win. Luke Traynor got a great win. Marcia Casey got a good win, I suppose, over Tim Wilde. And obviously he was promised the place in the lightweight tournament for next year, so let's see if that happens. Archie Colgan, not English, but he got a good win over Manuel Souza, who got that big knockout earlier on in the year. Mike Shipman also got a good win. And then for the Irish, Dara Kelly against Dimitri Hedrenko. Again, another one that's probably underrated performances of the year. And Kieran Clark against Thomas Grunwald, a guy who's, and again, that was on short notice, wasn't it? And a guy who's been around for a long time. What a win for Kieran Clark there. So, you know, Kieran Clark, Dara Kelly. Probably if you're talking about like two of the emerging guys from this year, you probably have those. And this is no bias because looking through it there, those lads probably fought more than anyone else and won more than anyone else. So great years for them. But there was a couple more Bellator fights, I suppose, on the super fight series. There was a title fight between Chris Cyborg and Larissa Pacheco. Now, I'd love to know what title that was, right? Because, Chris Cyborg is the Bellator champion, and she's still the Bellator champion, I would say, maybe, I don't know. But she won there, and Johnny Eblin also won against Fabian Edwards. I think they probably made that rematch a little bit too early, maybe. I would have liked to have seen that further down the line, but, the two Bellator champions won on that card, which was headlined by Francis Ngannou, which was their biggest card of the year. And you had Rafi and Stotts, obviously one of the big Bellator guys who's been around for a long time. You had, we'll get to another one in a second, but there was Ibrahim Himov, who's one of the best prospects on it. But you also had Paul Hughes against AJ McKee. AJ McKee has probably been, you could argue, up there as the best Bellator fighter over the last 5 years. Would that be fair to say? He's up there, like Eblin and a few more as well. Obviously all the champions I mentioned, and Patricio, who beat him, but very close fight, and he beat Patricio as well. And, Paul Hughes goes in there and beats him. And that was one of the wins of the year. Like, I know a bit of Irish bias here, but like, if you're Paul Hughes, but there was a lot of talk over the last few weeks about who's the emerging prospect of the year. And I saw a lot of people giving Carlos Prates, Dakota Ditchevan, or like, it's insane. It's obviously Paul Hughes. Like, Ditchevan had a brilliant year, but Ditchevan was the PFL Europe champion last year. Like, she's already emerged, right? No one has gone from where Paul Hughes was, but Paul Hughes was okay. He did very well in cage wise. Obviously, he was the champion a few years ago, but then he moved up to lightweight. He was fighting against good guys, but not great. They wouldn't be ranked in the top 100 in cage warriors, right? Fought Bobby King. Bobby King again, a good fighter, but he ranked in the top 100. No, so he goes maybe, but a guy who's ranked 79 in the world to AJ McKee. And he beats him. Like, you're talking about emerging prospects. Yeah. So people didn't give him that, but I'm giving him the Bellator Fighter of the Year, Paul Hughes. No one deserves it more. Okay, I could have given it to Ramazan Kuramagomedov. I could have given it to Johnny Eblin. But no, what Paul Hughes did in that fight, I actually rewatched the fight there last week. It was a tremendous beatdown, really. Paul Hughes dominated that fight. It was a split decision. Never a split decision in 100 years. AJ McKee should never got a card there. Paul Hughes was brilliant in that fight, and he won another few fights outside of that as well. But Paul Hughes, bit of bias, I don't care. Sheehan Shaw, Bellator Fighter of the Year. And before I let you go, I suppose, what are my hopes for next year? And I've talked a lot about next year, I know, at the start of here. But my hopes for next year is that we strive. Bellator strives. Or the PFL champions, or however you call it, right? The I hope the season strives well, but the non-season fights, I hope there is 10 cards or 8 cards, or whatever they choose to have, and I hope all of them are very good. I hope we have a lot of title fights. I hope we have Paul Hughes fighting a lot. I hope Patricio, if he continues there, fights a lot. I hope they all fight a lot, and stack those cards, and let's have some fun, baby. Let's have some fun. So there you go. That is my 2024 review for Bellator. My name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.